podcast, Simply Be Kind. If this is your first time listening, this podcast is a series of conversations with people about kindness. We hope that today's episode inspires you to do one kind thing today because it's easy to simply be kind. As we start off today's podcast, I'm going to begin with another disclaimer and a trigger warning that we will be talking about eating disorders. While the stories that we discuss today are not, completely unsettling, but the guests today do talk about situations where they've needed kindness and how they've received kindness in certain situations. It's completely okay if you don't want to hear this one, and you can choose this moment to practice a little self-care. When you meet someone after a very long time, what is the first thing that people start conversations with? It always starts off with, "How are you?" And then the next statement goes in either directions. It's either, "Oh, wow, you've lost so much weight," or it's, "Oh, wow, you've put on so much weight." And it does not add any value to the relationship or to the conversation. But for some reason, people think that it's okay to make a comment on someone's experience. I have with me two guests today. I have Kamakshi Malhotra and Prerna Suri, who will be sharing their experiences throughout the episode. But before we begin, we'll just start off with a few introductions. So, Kamakshi, can you tell us about what you're doing and your work?
Hi everyone, thanks Tanas for having me over here. My name is Kamakshi. I run an organization called Freed that focuses on encouraging conversations like this one around eating disorders in India, and also on building an ecosystem of support to be able to help families and individuals that are impacted by eating disorders.
Hi everyone, my name is Prerna. Thank you for having me here. I'm a PhD student working to find new therapies for patients that fail the existing therapies in the space of cancer. And I'm also somebody that has struggled with eating disorders before. So happy to chat today.
Thank you so much, both of y'all, for being here. I'm going to start off with my experience. And I've been underweight and, skinny for most of my life. And I still remember how when I was very small, there was a weighing machine that was like, on the streets. And when you would step on it, it would tell you the weight, but it would also pass a comment. So mine would always say that, "Oh, you're so skinny." And like that's how they would say, like, "So skinny." And I'm sure the machine probably said something, worse to someone on the other end of the spectrum. And it's been like 25 plus years, and I still have that shaming voice in my head. And, growing up, I've heard these words. I've heard words like skinny and anorexic, and I've heard them being interchanged and not knowing that they really mean two different things. And it's always been said in the context where I felt like there's something wrong with me. Kamakshi, I'm going to ask you, what kind of messaging surrounding weight did you hear growing up?
Actually, quite similar to you, Tanas. I think people use words that they haven't put enough thought to pretty colloquially, and especially in our culture, somehow it's very socially acceptable to say these things. And we're not, at least when we were children, we're not taught how to define boundaries as children, how to respond in a way that allowed us to express how words that were being sent our way made us feel. And so definitely growing up, there was commentary, very loose commentary being thrown around with weight. And I saw it with my mom. I wasn't personally at the receiving end of it as a young child, but I definitely saw it with people around me, where, like you said, the first thing anybody would say when you saw someone after a long time, or even after like 5 days, would be, "Oh, you've gained weight. What's going on?" Or, "Oh, you've lost weight. That's great. Like, congratulations." And so weight was very easy to talk about in some ways, for people. And in other ways, it's also like it was a source of distress. I could tell even as a child that nobody is appreciating this. Like, I've never met anyone who liked being told, or like who liked being commented on. Of course, now, having worked so much in this field and having had an eating disorder in the past, and having put so much thought into how it's actually affecting people, I know just the depths to which these words can go for someone, especially someone who might be struggling. But yeah, I think commentary growing up was just extremely easily available, and not, you can tell that people have not thought about what they're trying to say to the other person. It just comes so quickly to people. They've not even, I mean, that's not you trying to, connect with the person that you're talking to, right? It's just something you're saying.
Yeah. And what about you, Prerna? Just in terms of what messaging you heard when you were a child, was it same? Was it different? What was it like for you?
Yeah, I think pretty much the same, unfortunately. I think it's a common theme across the board, but I always struggled with weight since I was a child, and always being told, you're so fat, why don't you eat less? If you're so fat now, what's going to happen when you grow up? You're going to have all these issues. And it comes from kids, yes, but I think it comes from kids because they see adults talk this way. And so something as small as, in school, we'd have these health checkup days in the medical room, and there'd be this weighing scale that you'd have to get on. And these are like healthcare professionals, right, that are supposed to be nurturing and supposed to be your safe space. That in front of the entire line of people would just say, oh, you've gained even more weight. Like, look at your size. What's wrong with you? And so, as other kids seeing an adult in an authority position saying that, it kind of normalizes behavior like that. And so I think instead of showing kindness, a lot of it just goes into, fat shaming, or a lot of feeling guilt and feeling like there's something specifically wrong with you, or you've committed the biggest crime just by existing. So yeah, just lack of kindness and just these terms thrown around, and a lot of objectification and fat shaming.
Yeah. But I'm also curious to know if, if anything has changed for then versus now, because like when we were growing up, there was just like society was very different, and it was very easy to use these words. Has it changed over time?
I want so badly in my heart to say yes, but I don't think a lot of it has changed. I think along some axes we've gotten better, and along others we've gotten worse. And so I definitely see and work with a few schools now that actively teach social emotional learning, or like take the social emotional learning route when they're teaching children. And so education is becoming a little bit more focused around emotions and social skills, and focused around giving kids the vocabulary to express how they're feeling that goes beyond I'm mad or I'm sad. And that helps, because I think immediate vocabulary can be so empowering, right? So when kids know that something has made them feel embarrassed or guilty or angry, or anything that they have a word for, they can express, which forces adults to think about what they have just said and what the effect of what they have just said was, in a way that they didn't have to, in the past. So for sure, a lot of what Prerna was also mentioning, a lot of this fat shaming coming from teachers, coming from adults around you. I think I don't want to, diminish the power of what they're saying, but of course, they also were just not aware of how it is making children feel, in a way that adults today are forced to recognize. That said, where we just are so much more stimulated and have so much more content around us, and unfortunately, that content hasn't on average become more kind. So even on average, the content that kids are consuming, adults are consuming, is more fat phobic, and is more shaming, and is less accepting. And so I don't think things have quite changed to the degree that we are not making each other feel like we need to fit in a box. But it is changing to the degree that there is pressure on a big segment of society to stop and think about what they're saying, the words they are using, the impact that is having on people. And my hope is that if we continue in that direction, someday we will choose to be kinder, because we recognize what we're saying to each other.
Okay.
So I struggled with binge eating and bulimia, and I think a lot of it stemmed from that shaming and guilt as a child, where My dad dragged me to a nutritionist or a dietitian when I was maybe 8 or 9 to say I'm overweight, there's something wrong with me. And in my head, I was just like, okay, I'm being taken to like a professional to be looked at, and it just added a lot of stress, and being given like this very restrictive menu of what I could eat and what I couldn't. And every week or other week having to go back to the nutritionist office, and then, the same thing, it comes down to the same thing. There's a scale in the middle of the room that you're asked to stand on. And then, just that trauma of spending the next 2 weeks in worry of what that number will look like when you step on the scale again. Are you eating enough? Are you not eating enough? Which led to a very unhealthy relationship with food for me. And the more I would restrict myself, it would just lead to me having these behaviors where I'd then, suddenly start hiding what I was eating from my mom. And then I think, it really started to increase when I moved to the US. And, I was now dealing with a lot of additional stressors like school, living by myself for the first time, and then also having access to, all these delivery services and things like that. And that's when it started getting really bad, when I think the bulimia got really bad, the binge eating got really bad. And there was just a lot of guilt and shame, and it was like this cycle that I couldn't break, till my partner actually caught me doing this. And I think it was the kindness that he showed me, and the support I felt from him, that made me feel like, something that I should talk to another person about, seek professional help. And that's when I kind of told my mom, and then, went to therapy for it. And I think that really helped me. So it's just like one little act of kindness, I think, that really, really improved my mental health, and yeah, helped my struggle.
I'm glad. And was it easy to have access to like a mental health professional, or was that another hurdle that you had?
I think it was easy for me, but I think it was also because I am working in the field of medicine, healthcare. I was working at one of the best medical institutions in the country at the time. And so, as a student or an employee, it just made it easier for me to access that. I don't know if it would have been the case maybe, 10 years ago, or maybe in a different setting.
Okay. And just coming back to you, Kamakshi, does your story look similar? Health.
So yes and no, like it is in most cases. I think no two people's story looks the same, but oftentimes when you speak to somebody else with lived experience with an eating disorder, you can start to find certain trends that were similar. There was similar kind of social shaming around weight, and then an internalization of that, like, yes, must be something wrong with me, so I should do something, in hiding whatever I want to do. But for me, it started much later. I actually felt like I was a pretty confident child with no insecurities, mostly because I had never stopped to think about what my insecurities were and how they were manifesting in my life. But I felt like I didn't have any insecurities till I moved to college. And similar to what Prerna described, you move away from home for the first time, you have independence to make all of these decisions. And suddenly, and of course, you're vulnerable in many ways because you just never had to live like that before. And so in those like vulnerable moments, when somebody says something, it can often, snowball into something much bigger. And that's what happened with me. Just at the end of my first year of college, somebody I was living with at the time, she took a photo of me eating and posted it on social media, and it like led to a bunch of comments about my weight and about my eating habits in a way that, I mean, honestly, like now thinking back at it, felt like it was nobody's business. Why was it ever okay for anyone to take a picture of me and post it on a public platform? And then why was it ever okay for everybody else to have these comments? And why was it okay for them to post it on a public medium? But at the time, it was so easy for me to feel like they're saying all of this for a reason. That something is wrong with me and I must fix it. And I must fix it in a way that I never allow people or give anyone a chance to make me feel like this again. So I internalized it, and started eating healthier and, going to the gym and before I knew it, I was afraid of eating and I was afraid of gaining weight. And kind of what we talked about right at the beginning, you lose some weight and people around you start noticing and complimenting your weight loss without recognizing what might be behind that weight loss. And so that fueled my anorexia, which I didn't quite know what it was at the time, but it fueled my anorexic brain, thinking, oh, this is what society is responding to. This is how I ensure that nobody ever shames me for looking how I look, or eating how I want to eat. And for me, it snowballed very quickly. In fact, even within like 3 months, I was extremely sick. Thankfully for me, it happened by chance that I had to go to the hospital for something else, and a doctor actually noticed the weight loss and brought this to my attention, and said that, okay, this is not just you wanting to live healthier or you wanting to eat healthier, lose some weight. This is an eating disorder, which is a mental health concern, and it needs to be looked at by a team of professionals. And luckily for me, this doctor, and again, kind of brings me back to this act of kindness, sat me down, patiently explained to me what I was going through. For me, also, fortunately, I was lucky enough to find a therapist, a psychiatrist, a nutritionist, a support group, so much access to support. And my family was extremely kind, and my friends were extremely kind, and being able to, of course, they didn't know what I was going through. They didn't understand, and they didn't pretend to understand. All they said was, okay, yeah, we're here when you need to talk. And so, experience was similar, but also different in terms of, how we acted out and how long or hard the recovery process was, but similar in many ways also.
That actually sounded both difficult to hear, but I'm also really glad that you had doctors, and in that moment you had a doctor that told you instead of shaming you. I think that was also a very critical moment in your life where the doctor could have said something else, but he chose to say something that did transform your life for the better. So I think that it's really important, at least for people that are listening and for people um that are confused, like, okay, we're telling them that it's not okay to use those words, but then what do you say? So I just wanted to explore what a glossary could look like of how, what the right terms of the right phrases of this could look like.
It's hard for me to describe exactly the right thing to say because, of course, the one global truth about eating disorders is that no two people's experience or situations are the same. So, of course, you have to be a little mindful of, who you're speaking to. But from the point of view of somebody potentially either in a caregiver's position or a friend's position or an educator's position, speaking to someone that might be struggling with an eating disorder, I think the single biggest thing that you can do is listen. Because the one thing I can promise you is, as much as you want to say that you understand, you don't understand. Like, it's just very hard to understand something that you have not been through. So, and even if you have been through, the chances of their experience being extremely different from yours are very high. So I think accepting that you don't understand everything and not saying, I understand what you're going through, is very helpful. Not saying things like, oh, it's fine or it'll be fine is also helpful, because saying things like it'll be fine, even though your intentions might be right, can diminish what the other person is going through. So, and at the same time, you don't need to hype it up and be like, oh my God, this is such a big problem, we need to deal with it, like how big, for the big problem that it is. I think both, without causing alarm and without diminishing the problem, just hearing someone out can go a long way. Another thing I can say is, not, eating disorders are complicated. They are not as simple as what meets the eye. And so saying things like, just stop eating, or just eat normally, or, why aren't you eating? Saying things that seem matter-of-factly to you, and they're not matter-of-factly at all. There's so many nuances to why or how that person is reacting to food or behaving with food that you don't understand. So not saying things like that also will be very helpful in being able to allow the other person to feel safe in a conversation.
Also say
Yeah.
just, you know, as a matter of habit, when you see somebody, avoid commenting on their physical appearance, period. You know, come up with more adjectives of, you know, it's nice to see you, I haven't seen you in so long. Or like, if you have to comment, like, you have a beautiful smile, like you light up a room, things like that. And, you know, kind of steer away, whether the person has an eating disorder or not, from just feeling like it's okay to comment on someone's appearance, height, weight, skin color, just, you know.
Kind of like what we talked about in the beginning, right? Skinny and anorexia are completely different. So I can understand that you might not know exactly what anorexia is, and you don't have to, but you need to know that it's not the same as being skinny. Similarly, somebody who just looks overweight to you, according to your definitions, doesn't mean that they have a problem, or doesn't mean that they are unhealthy. And so avoid correlating too skinny in your, everybody has their own idea of what skinny, too skinny, overweight, obese looks like. There is no global truth for these things. So no matter what your spectrum is, try to dissociate that from, or try to understand the depth of your words. Calling somebody obese, calling somebody unhealthy, calling somebody anorexic, speaking to calling somebody's food eating or like eating habits as binge eating. They're not colloquially usable terms. These terms have a lot of meaning and depth behind them. So unless you are, professionally certified to be able to talk about them like that, just avoid using these terms.
No, I think a little kindness goes a long way. So I think the first thing is, you know, don't say anything to anybody that you wouldn't want to hear yourself. So yeah, just empathy more than sympathy, and to really give people space to come up with it and tell you by themselves, you know. So be there, let them know you're there, but also don't try and coax things out of them when they're not ready. Yeah, just be supportive, be kind, and that's it.
Okay. And whether they've told you that they have an eating disorder or not, what do you think are 3 ways that someone should be empathetic and kind towards someone in that space?
I think in general, not assuming things is a way to express empathy also, because just being mindful of the fact that you don't know what's going on in somebody's life. And I can tell you by experience that even some of my closest friends that I grew up with, I did not know were struggling with an eating disorder while we were friends. So, no matter how close you feel to somebody, it's not easy for someone to share their experience with you. So not to assume that you know what's going on in someone's life, and therefore not congratulating somebody for their weight loss or not shaming somebody for their weight gain is the start of showing empathy towards somebody that might be dealing with an eating disorder. Then I feel, and of course this is a generic statement in a way that you can practice empathy with everybody, but specifically somebody that is struggling with their food or relationships with their bodies, not to overshare about your own, incredible relationship with your body or your incredible achievements with food. And, because for a lot of people, it's a sense of pride to be able to be extremely structured or disciplined, or what they feel is structure and discipline. Unless somebody is asking you, I think it's oversharing, and you never know how it is going to be received by the other person. It's a lot of pressure for someone. I can speak from experience. It's a lot of pressure for me to hear somebody talk about their perfect relationship and how they've hacked their bodies to the exact amount. It's very uncomfortable for me to hear that from people.
It's also coming from a space I've realized that like it's them trying to be empathetic. It's wrong.
Totally.
It's them trying to be empathetic, and they say that, okay, if I tell them about my super body or whatever, it's gonna change their life, and they are going to like completely change. But it's not true, So I think I'm so glad that you brought it up, because people think that that's them being empathetic and being motivating, but it's not.
And I think, part of that is just recognizing that everybody's struggles look the same. So just because your struggle was to find structure and find discipline with your bodies, somebody else's struggle might be to lose that sense of extreme like rules and regulations. So not generalizing what, victory or a win with your body or food looks like is a way to show empathy with somebody that might be struggling. And I think also along the same lines, one thing that people who think you're struggling with insecurities can do is try to push you to feel grateful about your body. And sure, like as a blanket statement, yes, I should be grateful for what my body can do for me. But I don't wake up every morning and look at myself in the mirror and feel, oh, great, you look great. And I can't. That's not feasible for me. So if somebody tries to tell me that I'm being ungrateful or I'm like, I should just forget my insecurities and be grateful for the functional things that the body can do for me, it's not possible all the time. So that's too much pressure in my case. And so I think in general, being very body positive and, overly positive and excited about appearance and weight and bodies can be too much pressure for someone, especially someone dealing with an eating disorder. So maybe refrain from something like that can be an act of kindness and empathy towards somebody else. So that would be my 3 things.
What about you, Prerna?
I don't know how much more I have to add to that, honestly, but I think the biggest thing is to make someone feel validated and not diminish what they're going through. And then along those lines, I think, yes, like let them know that you're there and, give them a few resources, offer help, but, don't send them a new video or a new link every day, every other day, every minute. I think it can be very overwhelming. I think the decision or like, understanding or accepting first that you have an eating disorder is sometimes frightening enough in itself. And so, you're dealing with a lot at the time, emotionally, mentally, physically. So a little bit of space. And I know it's like a really hard line or balance to like be really supportive, but also like give the person enough space. So, finding whatever that balance is for the person that you're trying to support. Yeah, and then just I think not being judgmental, not jumping to conclusions. Yeah.
I'm also just going to ask one more question because this has been something that I've been wondering about. There is a lot of body positivity that is out there now on social media, but you see equal number of comments saying that, oh, but just supporting body positivity does not mean that you should neglect your health. Why don't you, take care of your health? Why are you letting yourself get this way? Like, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. No, that's a great question. In fact, something that we often think about as an organization also. And we're very mindful of the fact that in our communication, we have to be very clear that saying, talking about body, in fact, we don't even talk about body positivity. Like I said, to me, it's an unachievable target on a daily basis. So we're more body neutral to that degree. But, talking about body neutrality, talking about, not being, not overthinking your weight and not overthinking your food and blah, 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 is not our stance. I think our stance, if I had to just give you a generic statement, is to detach appearance and weight from health and wellness. So, of course, nothing that we are saying should make somebody think that we want you to neglect health and thinking about your health and prioritizing your health. I mean, health is everything. Of course, we want people to be healthy and we want people to prioritize their health and well-being. But when that starts to get entangled with appearance and when we start to think about our weight and our shape and our appearance as our health, that's when things start to go south. And that's what we don't want to do. So if you are exercising that 5 minutes extra because you want to lose 5 kilos, that's not telling me anything that I should be worried about. But if you want to lose those 5 kilos because you feel like your pictures will look better, and somebody will, you're more likely to get a comment on Facebook or Instagram because your pictures will look better in a bathing suit. That starts to worry me. Like, why are you exercising? Is it to be healthy, or is it to look a certain way and to get certain validation externally? If you're eating a certain way, because people have all sorts of health reasons that require them to be regimented about their food. So of course we want we want people to who are dealing with those health concerns, whether it's diabetes or PCOS or hypertension or whatever that requires them to be regimented. Of course, that's something that you should prioritize. But if it's to look a certain way, or if it's to have, a lot of so many people, go on diets because summer is coming, somebody's wedding is coming, I have to go meet family and they're going to comment on my, like, that to me is not health and well-being, right? So if you're being honest with yourself and actually thinking about health and well-being in a way that it should be thought about, then of course, I'm all for that. But we just want to distinguish between those two things because they're very different.
Mhm. I think this was definitely a great episode, and I'm sure people have learned, but more importantly, unlearned a lot of things about, like, eating disorders, what it looks like, and I really hope that people are a little more mindful and a little more kind from today onwards about the way that they speak to people. So yeah, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you so much for listening to the Simply Be Kind podcast. If you enjoy the podcast, can you do us a huge favor and rate and review it? Because it helps more listeners find the show. Subscribe to the podcast on Spotify, Amazon Music, YouTube, or whatever platform you use. Each episode is under production for around a month, and hence we only release it once a month. So it's a huge help if you can take your time to review it and share the episode with your friends and on social media. And of course, be sure to check out our page, Kind Hearts Brigade, on social media, where we aim to have more conversations surrounding everyday kindness. If you have any thoughts on today's episode, or you have topics that you would want us to further touch upon, reach out to me on Instagram. Thanks again, and I'll see you soon.